When my daughter stood in the doorway of my own study, the room where I'd spent 30 years drafting bridge specifications for the province, and told me with a perfectly straight face that this was their house now, and I'd better learn to accept it, I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I looked at the brand new deadbolt her husband had installed on what used to be my den door, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not rage. Relief. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. And I meant every syllable. "You just made the hardest decision of my life remarkably simple." 4 days later, when the eviction notice arrived and Cody's car wouldn't start because I'd canceled the insurance he didn't know I'd been paying, my phone rang 11 times before midnight. I let every call go to voicemail. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. It started the way these things always start, with a phone call and a lie. Julianne called me on a Tuesday evening last October, her voice carrying that particular wobble she'd perfected as a teenager whenever she needed something she knew I wouldn't want to give. "Dad, we're in a bit of a bind." The bind, as she explained it, was simple. She and Cody had been evicted from their apartment in Hamilton. Not for anything dramatic, she assured me. The landlord was renovating, raising rents, the usual story. It just needed somewhere to stay for 2 weeks, maybe 3, while Cody's new job got sorted out. 2 weeks. I should have that phrase tattooed somewhere as a permanent reminder of my own stupidity. I said yes, of course. What father wouldn't? My wife Kathleen had passed 3 years earlier, pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless, and the house in Burlington felt enormous without her. 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, a backyard I'd landscaped myself, with flagstone paths and a little koi pond Kathleen had always wanted. Too much space for one retired man and his dog. So they arrived on a Friday afternoon with a U-Haul that was suspiciously large for a 2-week stay. Cody backed it into the driveway without asking, clipping the corner of my mailbox, and shrugged when I pointed it out. "We'll fix that," he said. We never did. The first month was manageable. Cody was pleasant enough on the surface, the kind of man who called everyone buddy and laughed too loudly at his own observations. He was 33, broad-shouldered, with a handshake he used like a weapon and a resume that seemed to change depending on who was asking. Digital marketing, he told me once. Project management, he told my neighbor, Mr. Kowalski. Consulting, he told Julian's cousin at Thanksgiving. What he actually did, as far as I could determine, was sleep until noon, commandeer the living room television for hockey highlights he could have watched on his phone, and order food delivery with a frequency that suggested he believed cooking was beneath him. The delivery charges went to a credit card. My credit card, as I discovered 6 weeks in when the statement arrived with $2,300 in charges I didn't recognize. "Jules gave me the card for groceries," Cody said when I asked, not looking up from his phone. "Delivery is basically groceries." I stood there holding the statement, reading line after line of skip the dishes and DoorDash charges, and felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not yet. More like the first hairline crack in a dam you've been maintaining for decades. The kind of crack you can still ignore if you try hard enough. So, I tried. I canceled the card and got a replacement. Told Julianne, gently, that the grocery arrangement needed boundaries. She nodded with the patient expression of someone humoring a difficult elderly relative and said she understood completely. 2 weeks later, I found $847 in charges on my backup Visa, the one I kept in my desk drawer for emergencies. When I asked how Cody had gotten the number, Julianne's face went carefully blank. He needed gas money for the job interviews, Dad. $800 in gas money. Everything's expensive now. You know that. I knew something, all right. I knew that in 3 months, they'd contributed exactly nothing to the household while my expenses had nearly doubled. Hydro bills up 40% from Cody's gaming setup running 18 hours a day. Grocery costs through the roof, because Cody ate like a man training for something. Though the only exercise I ever saw him do was walking from the couch to the fridge. My water bill, which had been steady for a decade, jumped because Julianne had decided my bathroom was nicer than the guest one, and had taken to running baths that lasted an hour. But I kept quiet. I kept quiet because Kathleen would have wanted me to. Because Julianne was my only child, and I'd promised her mother I'd always be there for her. Because I was 62 years old, and the silence of this house sometimes pressed against my eardrums like deep water, and even difficult company was better than none. That was the lie I told myself, anyway. The lock appeared on a Saturday morning in January. I'd gone to my study after breakfast, the way I did every morning, to read the paper and drink my coffee in the leather chair Kathleen had bought me for my 60th birthday. But when I turned the knob, it didn't move. I tried again. Locked. A new deadbolt, brass, had been installed overnight. The wood around the strike plate was scarred where someone had worked quickly and without much care. I found Cody in the kitchen, eating cereal out of the pot because apparently every bowl was dirty, and asked him about it. "Oh, yeah," he said, chewing. "I set up my office in there. Need some privacy for calls. You understand. Your office. In my study. It's the quietest room. Better internet signal, too." He said this as if he were doing me a favor, as if his decision to annex the room where I kept my books, my drafting table, the framed photos of Kathleen and me at Niagara Falls, was a practical solution to a shared problem. "Cody, that's my room." "It's a room in the house, bud. We're all living here. Gotta share the space." Share the space. In the house, I'd paid off over 28 years of mortgage payments. The house I'd rewired myself, re-roofed with my brother Vince's help. The house where I'd carried Kathleen over the threshold, and where I'd held her hand the night she decided she wanted to die at home instead of the hospital. Share the space. "I'd like you to remove the lock," I said. Cody looked at me for a long moment, and I watched his expression cycle through something I'd seen before in men who decided they were in charge. Amusement, then condescension, then a hardness that was supposed to make me back down. "Look, I get that this is an adjustment, but Jules and I are building something here. I need a proper workspace. You got the whole rest of the house." "The rest of my house," I said. "Come on, don't be like that. Remove the lock, Cody." "Or what?" The question hung in the kitchen like smoke. "Or what?" The question hung in the kitchen like smoke. Or what? The challenge of a man who calculated, correctly until that moment, that I wouldn't push back because I was too decent, too lonely, too old to fight. I didn't answer. I turned and walked away, which I'm sure he interpreted as surrender. It wasn't. That afternoon, Julianne came to find me in the backyard, where I was clearing snow from the flagstone path. She was wearing Kathleen's old gardening jacket, the green one with the ripped pocket, and the sight of it on her made my throat tighten in a way I wasn't prepared for. "Dad, we need to talk about the study situation." "Yes, we do. Your husband installed a lock on my door without asking. He needs space for work, Dad." "What work?" "He hasn't had a job in 8 months." Her face flushed, and I saw it. The shift. The moment when a daughter stops seeing her father and starts seeing an obstacle. "He's been interviewing. These things take time. 8 months of time? You don't understand the job market. I understand that someone who locks me out of my own room in my own house has a problem with boundaries, not employment." Julianne crossed her arms. Kathleen's gesture, the jacket, the posture, the stubbornness, everything inherited except the cruelty. "This is our home now too, Dad. You need to accept that. Cody is my husband. This is our life, and if you can't respect that, if you can't respect him, then maybe we need to have a different conversation about whose house this really is." There it was. The sentence I'd been dreading without knowing I'd been dreading it. "Whose house this really is," delivered by my daughter in my dead wife's jacket. On the path I'd laid stone by stone the summer Julianne turned 12, and helped me mix the mortar. I felt something snap, not break. Snap in a place like the last tumbler in a lock clicking open. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. My voice sounded strange to me, calm and clear and utterly done. "You just made the hardest decision of my life remarkably simple." Her face changed. I'd seen that look on engineers when a load-bearing calculation came back wrong. The sudden realization that the structure they'd assumed was solid had a fundamental flaw. What's that supposed to mean? It means you have 30 days. I walked past her into the house, past Cody on the couch who didn't look up from his phone, past the locked door of my study, and up to my bedroom. I closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and called my brother in Kelowna. Vince, remember when you said your coach house was sitting empty? Been empty 2 years, just collecting dust. Why? I think I'm going to need it. His voice went quiet for a moment. Vince knew about the situation. I'd mentioned bits and pieces at Christmas, but I'd downplayed it the way men of our generation do, making problems sound manageable because admitting otherwise felt like weakness. Come whenever you want, he said. Stay as long as you need. I mean that. I know you do. I hung up and sat in the quiet of my bedroom, listening to the muffled sounds of my daughter and her husband moving through my house like they owned it. Then I opened my laptop and searched for real estate agents in Burlington. The next morning, I began. I didn't make a speech. I didn't issue ultimatums or slam doors. I just started quietly, methodically dismantling the infrastructure of their comfort. First, I called the bank, canceled every card connected to my account, including the backup Visa they'd been treating like a company expense account. I set up new accounts at a different branch, cards with my name only, mailed to a P.O. box I rented that afternoon. Then, I called the internet provider, canceled the service entirely. When Cody came downstairs at noon to find his gaming setup disconnected from the digital world, the look on his face was almost worth 8 months of aggravation. Internet's down, he said, staring at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. Canceled it, I said from the kitchen table where I was reading the paper I'd picked up from the corner store. Actual paper. It felt good in my hands. You what? Canceled it. I don't need it. If you'd like internet service, you're welcome to set up your own account. That's insane. You can't just cancel the internet. I can, actually. It was in my name, paid with my money, for a service I rarely used. What am I supposed to do? The library on Brant Street has free Wi-Fi. Opens at 9. I could hear the gears turning behind his eyes, the dawning comprehension that something fundamental had changed in the house, that the accommodating old man he'd been managing had stopped accommodating. Jules! He shouted up the stairs. She came down 15 minutes later, her hair still wet from one of her marathon baths, and found Cody pacing the kitchen while I calmly ate a sandwich. Dad, did you seriously cancel the internet? I did. Why? Because it's my account, my expense, and I've decided I don't need it. But we need it. Cody needs it for job applications. I took a bite of my sandwich. Turkey on rye. Simple. Satisfying. Cody can get his own internet. He can also get his own phone plan, since I noticed the family plan I've been paying for has 3 lines, and only one of them is mine. I watched her process this, the slow realization that my generosity hadn't been inevitable, that the infrastructure of their daily life in my house, internet, phone service, credit cards, streaming subscriptions, all of it flowed through me and could be cut off at the source. You're being petty, she said. I'm being practical. You told me yesterday that we need to have a conversation about whose house this is. I agree. This is my house, and I'm choosing what services I want to pay for in it. This is ridiculous. You can't just cut everything off. I can, and tomorrow I'm changing the Netflix and Prime accounts too. You're welcome to subscribe with your own money. We don't have money, Dad. You know that. Then I'd suggest Cody visit the library. Day 2. I canceled the streaming services. Day 3. I called the gas company and changed the thermostat password, setting it to 18 degrees, perfectly comfortable with a sweater, intolerable for someone who'd been keeping the house at 24 all winter at my expense. Day 4. I removed the spare key from under the flower pot and informed them the only key would be with me, so they'd need to coordinate their comings and goings with my schedule. Each day, one thing. Not vindictive, not dramatic, just a steady, methodical withdrawal of the support they'd mistaken for entitlement. Cody tried intimidation on day 5. He blocked the hallway as I was heading to the kitchen, using his size the way some men do, filling the space with his shoulders and his voice. This is getting out of hand, old man. You need to stop this. Stop what? This passive-aggressive campaign. The internet? The thermostat? The cards? You're trying to force us out. I'm not forcing anything. I'm simply choosing not to subsidize the lifestyle of two adults who've contributed nothing to this household in 8 months, and whose response to being asked for basic consideration was to threaten me. Nobody threatened you. Your wife told me I'd better accept that this is your house now, or we'd need to have a different conversation. That sounds like a threat to me. She was frustrated. You were being impossible. I was asking you to remove a lock from my study door. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. Coffee made from beans I'd bought, brewed in a machine I'd paid for, consumed by a man who thought proximity equaled power. I'm warning you, he said. Don't make this into something it doesn't have to be. You're warning me, in my own house. I looked at him steadily. 62 years old, 5'10", 170 pounds. He was bigger, younger, stronger. But I'd spent 40 years building things that held weight, and I knew something about foundations. I'd be very careful with your next words, Cody. Something in my voice, or maybe in my eyes, made him step back. Not much, just a half step. But enough. On day 6, Cody called the police. I was in the garden, refilling the bird feeder Kathleen and I had hung together, when the cruiser pulled up. 2 officers, a man and a woman, both young enough to be my grandchildren. They were polite, professional, and clearly uncomfortable. Sir, we received a complaint about domestic disturbance. An individual at this address says he's been threatened and is being denied access to basic necessities. Denied access to basic necessities, I repeated. In my own home. By me, the homeowner. I invited them inside. Showed them the deed. Showed them the utility bills in my name. Showed them the credit card statements documenting 8 months of unauthorized charges. Showed them the lock Cody had installed on my study door. The female officer examined the lock, then looked at Cody with the expression of someone reassessing a situation. Sir, did you install this? It's from my office, Cody said, but his voice had gone thin. In the homeowner's study, without his permission? We live here. We have rights. You're a guest in his home, sir. There's a difference. They left 20 minutes later with the suggestion that Cody and Julianne might want to consult a lawyer about their options, delivered in a tone that made it clear they didn't think those options were many. The female officer paused at the door and said, quietly enough that only I could hear, You're handling this well, sir. I nodded. I didn't feel like I was handling it well. I felt like I was disassembling my own family, bolt by bolt, and watching the pieces fall without knowing if anything worth saving would remain. Day 10. Julianne called Vince. I know this because Vince called me immediately afterward, laughing in the way he does when something is so absurd that laughter is the only appropriate response. Your daughter just called me to say you're having a mental health crisis. Did she? She said you've been acting erratically since retirement, canceling services, making irrational financial decisions, showing signs of cognitive decline. She asked if I could come talk some sense into you. And what did you say? I said if cutting off a freeloader's internet and credit cards is cognitive decline, I'd like to decline a little myself. He paused. She didn't appreciate the joke. I imagine not. She also said you're selling the house. I am. Longer pause. You sure about that? I looked around the kitchen, at the backsplash Kathleen and I had tiled together, at the window where she'd hung herbs in little clay pots, at the corner where our dog used to sleep before he passed 2 years after her, as if he'd been waiting to make sure I could manage alone before he followed. I'm sure, I said. This house was ours. It hasn't been ours for a long time. Now it's just mine. And mine isn't enough to fill it. Then come to Kelowna. The coach house is ready whenever you are. Day 14. Cody posted on Facebook. I don't have Facebook myself, but Mr. Kowalski from next door showed me on his tablet, his thick mechanic's fingers scrolling through a post that Cody had apparently shared publicly. It was long, emotional, and almost entirely fictional. According to Cody, I was a controlling, emotionally abusive father-in-law who was systematically trying to destroy his marriage by making them homeless in the middle of a Canadian winter. He'd tagged Julianne, who'd added a comment that read, "This is so hard, we just wanted to be a family." The comments were split. Some people I didn't know expressed outrage on their behalf, but scattered among them were responses from people who did know me. Mr. Kowalski had already commented, "I've known this man for 15 years. He rebuilt my porch stairs for free and drove my wife to chemo appointments when I couldn't get off work. Whatever is happening in that house, it's not what you're describing." 3 other neighbors had left similar messages. My former colleague Neil, from the engineering firm, had written simply, "I trust this man with my life. Something doesn't add up here." "You got more friends than you know," Mr. Kowalski said, closing his tablet with the gentle finality of a man who'd seen enough. I thanked him and went back inside, where Julianne was sitting at the kitchen table with red eyes and a legal pad covered in notes. "We need to talk," she said. "We've been talking. You haven't been listening. Dad, please, we can fix this." "What exactly would you like to fix?" "Everything. The lock, the money, the disrespect. All of it. Cody will get a job, a real one. We'll pay rent. We'll follow your rules. Whatever you want." "What I want," I said, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her, "is to not feel like a stranger in my own home. What I want is to not worry about what new charge will appear on my credit card, or what room will be locked when I wake up, or which of my neighbors will be told I'm losing my mind because I asked for basic respect." Tears started down her face, not the performative tears I'd seen when she wanted something. These looked real. These looked like the tears of someone who just caught sight of the wreckage she'd helped create. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I believe you mean that right now, but you meant it 3 months ago when I canceled the first credit card, and a week later Cody was charging meals to the backup. You meant it when I asked about the lock, and your response was to tell me this wasn't my house anymore. Apologies without change are just words, Jules, and I've had enough words. So what happens now? Now you have 16 days to find somewhere to live, and I have a house to sell." "You're really selling?" "I'm really selling." "Where will you go?" "Somewhere I'm welcome." She flinched as if I'd slapped her, and I felt the impact too, the cruelty of truth delivered to someone you love, the awful necessity of protecting yourself from the person you'd give anything to protect. "Daddy," she said, and the word hit me like a sledgehammer. She hadn't called me that since she was 9 years old, since the night she'd had a fever, and I'd sat by her bed reading Charlotte's Web until she fell asleep. "Please don't do this." I stood up because if I stayed sitting, if I kept looking at her face and hearing that word, I would break, and I couldn't afford to break. Not now. "I love you," I said from the doorway. "That's never going to change, but I am done being punished for it." Day 22. They tried one more time. I came home from the hardware store to find Cody's mother sitting in my living room, a woman named Rhonda whom I'd met exactly twice, once at the wedding and once at a Thanksgiving dinner where she'd spent 3 hours explaining why her son was destined for greatness, if people would just give him the right opportunities. "We need to discuss this situation," Rhonda said, in the tone of someone who'd been briefed on a version of events that bore little resemblance to reality. "There's nothing to discuss. Your son and my daughter have been given 30 days' notice. They have 8 days left. You can't throw a family onto the street. Your son installed a lock on my study door, ran up $15,000 on my credit cards, called the police to report me for abuse in my own home, and posted on social media that I'm a controlling monster. At what point does family stop being a shield for that behavior?" Rhonda opened her mouth, closed it, and looked at Cody with an expression I recognized. The look of a mother realizing, perhaps for the first time, that the story she'd been told had significant omissions. "15,000, she said quietly. "I have the statements." "Cody, is that true?" "It's complicated, Mom." "It's not complicated," I said. "It's arithmetic. 8 months, $15,000, 0 contribution. Your son has been living in my house rent-free while treating me like an inconvenience in my own hallway." Rhonda stood up, smoothed her coat, and gave Cody a look that would have withered concrete. "We'll discuss this at home," she said, which I took to mean that Cody's version of events was about to undergo significant revision. She stopped at the door. "I'm sorry," she said to me. "I didn't know. Most people don't. That's what they count on." Day 30 arrived on a Tuesday. I woke up early, brewed coffee in the kitchen where Kathleen and I had shared 3 decades of mornings, and sat at the table listening to the house breathe, the furnace ticking, the pipes settling, the particular creak of the third step that I'd never fixed because Kathleen said it was the house's way of saying good morning. By noon, their things were gone. Not all of them. A few boxes remained in the basement, but the visible evidence of their occupation had been removed. The gaming setup, the piles of shoes by the door, the stack of delivery containers on the counter that I'd stopped mentioning weeks ago. Julianne appeared in the kitchen doorway one last time. She looked smaller than I remembered, younger, stripped of the brittle confidence that Cody seemed to inflate in her like a balloon. "I don't know where we're going," she said. "That's something you'll need to figure out. Will you call me?" I looked at my daughter, 31 years old. My eyes, her mother's chin, a stubbornness that could have come from either side of the family. She was carrying a box of kitchen things, including a set of mixing bowls I recognized as Kathleen's, and the sight of them in her arms made something in my chest fold in on itself. "Leave the bowls," I said. She looked down at the box, then back at me, and set them on the counter without a word. Something passed between us. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation. Just an acknowledgement that some things belonged where they were. "I'll call you when I'm ready," I said. "I don't know when that will be." She nodded, picked up her box, and walked out the front door. Cody was already in the truck, engine running, not looking at the house. He'd stopped looking at me days ago, the way people avoid eye contact with someone they've wronged, but aren't prepared to admit it. I watched them pull out of the driveway. The mailbox post was still crooked from where Cody had clipped it with the U-Haul 8 months ago. I'd fix it this afternoon. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd leave it crooked, as a reminder that some damage is small enough to repair, and some isn't. And the trick is knowing the difference. The house sold in 11 days. The agent, a sharp woman named Sheila who'd sold 3 houses on my street, said it was the fastest closing she'd handled in 2 years. "This market is hungry for well-maintained homes," she told me. "And this one is a gem. You can tell someone loved it." Someone did, I thought. 2 someones for a long time. I packed methodically, kept what mattered, donated what didn't. Mr. Kowalski took the garden tools and promised to maintain the koi pond until the new owners decided what to do with it. I gave the bird feeder to the woman across the street who'd always admired it. The leather chair for my study, the one Kathleen had given me, I shipped to Vince's place in Kelowna. Everything else was just stuff. The drive from Burlington to Kelowna took 4 days. I stopped in Sudbury, Thunder Bay, and Winnipeg, sleeping in motels that smelled like pine air freshener and industrial carpet cleaner. Each morning I woke up lighter, as if the kilometers were scrubbing something off me. Obligation, maybe, or the particular exhaustion of loving someone who'd learned to use your love as leverage. Vince's coach house was small, clean, and warm. He'd put fresh sheets on the bed and stocked the fridge with the kind of beer we'd drunk as teenagers, back when our problems were simple enough to solve with a weekend and a case of Molson. The view from the kitchen window looked out over the lake, and the first morning I sat there watching the sun come up over the water, I cried for the first time since Kathleen's funeral. Not for what I'd lost, for how long I'd waited to let myself feel it. 6 months passed. I joined a woodworking club, built a bookshelf for Vince's wife, Lorene, started volunteering at a community workshop teaching kids how to use hand tools, got a dog, a mutt from the shelter who'd been there so long they'd named him Lefty, because he always tilted his head to the left when he was confused, which was most of the time. Julianne called in April. I left him, she said. No preamble, no small talk, just the 3 words I had been expecting without realizing I had been expecting them. "Are you all right?" "I'm staying with Rhonda, actually." She offered after Cody. She trailed off. "It got bad, Dad." After we left your place, he got worse. The spending, the lying. He started borrowing money from people and not paying it back. Rhonda kicked him out of her place too, eventually. I listened to my daughter's voice through the phone, thin and tired and stripped of the defensiveness that had armored her for the better part of a year. She sounded like the girl who helped me lay flagstone paths, who'd cried when the mortar got in her eyes and laughed when I sprayed her with the garden hose to wash it out. I'm sorry, Dad, for everything. For the lock. For the credit cards. For what I said about the house. For bringing the police and the neighbors and Mom into it. You didn't bring your mother into it. I thought about it. I called Barb Hennessy to get her number. Got as far as dialing before I chickened out. Almost, then. Close enough. I know sorry isn't enough, she continued. You told me that. Apologies without change are just words, so I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me show you that I've changed, however long that takes. I sat in the coach house with Lefty's head on my foot and the lake turning gold in the late afternoon light, and I thought about what forgiveness actually means. Not the erasure of harm, not the restoration of what was, something smaller and harder and more honest than that. You're welcome to visit, I said, but you will never live with me again. She was quiet for a long moment. I understand. And Jules, yeah? Bring your own groceries? She laughed, a real laugh surprised out of her like a bird flushed from cover. It was the best sound I'd heard in months. I hung up and walked Lefty down to the lake, where the water was doing that thing it does in spring, holding the mountains upside down in perfect reflection. So still you couldn't tell which world was the real one, an older man and a crooked-headed dog, standing at the edge of something that looked a lot like peace. Some relationships, once broken, aren't meant to be rebuilt the way they were. They're meant to be rebuilt differently, smaller maybe, and more carefully, with better foundations and fewer assumptions about what love requires you to endure. And some mornings, when the light hits the lake just right, that's more than enough. If you enjoyed the story, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. And when you're ready for the next story, just click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.